We were planning on welcoming in Matt George, host of the Locked On Kings podcast, and said we welcome in Maddie McQueen, who's man, that was a stiff glass that you just poured right there. Oh, all right, buddy. There you go.
Let's talk some Kings basketball. I'm ready.
Maddie McQueen is in the building.
What's up, guys?
How you doing, buddy?
We just figured out it's first time this year we've talked to you. First time in 2022. Can I tell him Happy New Year's, Damien?
Nope, absolutely not. Not
since the new year.
It doesn't matter. You should. That's your fault. You could have called him. You could have texted him. I saw Matt last week.
My bad, big dog.
That's true. D'Lo and I chopped it up on Locked On Kings, which I appreciate. If you missed that episode, go and check it out. But now I'm back here to invade D'Lo and KC. Let's do it.
So let's start with this. Kenny said season's over. Like it's done. Like I'm out. Where are you? Is Kings season over for you?
I think season is at a crossroads. I did a podcast, yesterday's podcast. I was joined by Brendan Nunez of King's Pulse, and we talked about this a little bit. And actually, today's podcast, which is dropping at 4 right after your guys' show gets off the air, I talk about how the road that the Kings have to take here is kind of being decided for them as we get each day closer and each game closer to the trade deadline itself, and the Kings continue to move in the wrong direction. You two were just discussing the fact that the Kings are now 3 games back of Portland in the play-in race. And once again, it's important to bring up the point of making the play-in is to make the playoffs, not just make the play-in for play-in's sake. Because if that's the case, then the play-in is just a beautifully fun, disguised purgatory. That's all it is. If you make the play in as a 10th seed or 9th seed, even if you win the first game and say you advance to game 2, if you lose, it doesn't matter. You're still in the same spot that you've been in for 15 seasons, which is not good enough to make the playoffs, not bad enough to have a top pick. So I think this Kings season is at a crossroads right now. Is it over? Maybe for the sense of the hopes of the playoffs being a legitimate target for the Kings, maybe that is over, Casey. But I think if the Kings are potentially willing to pivot their focus towards this upcoming draft, pivot their focus towards the future, one which can still be built around De'Aaron Fox and Tyreke Halliburton, approach this trade deadline accordingly with that in mind, then maybe we have something. But at this point in time, this current version of this Kings team is definitely over. And I think the pipe dream that is the Kings making the playoffs is over too.
Sad, real sad. What's your take, Matt, on my take of Monte McNair in this front office is kind of just let this season die. We've been talking for about, now we're looking at probably 6-7 weeks whenever Luke Walton was fired, about making changes with this roster, getting guys out of here and not being so caught up on value and all this other stuff. You have to make moves and change this roster up because these guys together, they don't work. And for the better part of almost 2 months now, they've done nothing, waiting for this big fish to land and Ben Simmons trade or whoever, that's Sabonis or whatever the case may be, that I could tell you was never going to come. Like this was never going to happen. It was a pipe dream. And now here you are, 18-30, possibly going to be about 18-34 by the end of this road trip. And the season's done. And we're still dealing with the same team. And if you would have been proactive and took care of some of the moves earlier in the year, I think you could have had an opportunity to salvage the season. You think it was that simple?
I think it's getting to that point. I would be okay with McNair giving up on the, like I said, pipe dream that is actually making the playoffs through the plan. I'm not okay with Monte McNair giving up, period. And what I mean by that is if you are going to pivot your focus, like I said, if you are going to stop that goal of making the playoffs, it might have been a foolish goal to begin with, although I agree with you, KC, and we discussed it a lot at the beginning of the season, early on in the season. This team had the potential to make the playoffs. They just are not capable of playing good basketball together, and that's been made abundantly clear over the last 3 seasons. But if the Kings are pivoting the focus or are to pivot a focus to a more future-oriented, draft-oriented, starting kind of over with a build around Fox and Halliburton mindset, I'm not forgiving them for ultimately failing their goal of making the playoffs. They're not forgiven, but you can at least get that next step off to the right start with this trade deadline. Now, on this show, on Locked On Kings, I preached a ton about a swing for the fences move, and I still would love to see the Kings in some capacity go for a swing for the fences move, as long as that swing for the fences move is not a stupid swing for the fences move that McNair is making out of desperation, not just to make the playoffs, but to save his own job. I think that is maybe the worst case scenario in all of this. And I sincerely hope that McNair, his seat isn't as hot as some people are making it out to be. We haven't read any reports or heard anything about McNair being on the hot seat, but the fact that he's only had an off season and a half, granted, you could say he's wasted that time, and I understand that to some extent, but he hasn't been here long enough, in my opinion, to consider moving on from him. I think that would look horrible for this organization that already looks plenty bad. If I'm the Kings at this point in time, if I'm McNair, I'm either, if the playoffs are still the goal, I'm making a move in the next couple of days. I can't afford to wait any longer, or I'm pivoting my focus. And I would honestly say that the Kings right now, they have like where they sit, they have the best odds at the 7th pick. They have a 37%. If the lottery was today, they have a 37% chance of moving in the top 3, a 7% chance or something like that to get the number 1 overall pick. So the way I formed it is, what's the higher percentage chance? 7% to get the number 1 overall pick, or the Kings percentage to actually make the playoffs, not the play-in, the playoffs. I'd say playoffs is probably lower than 7%.
Oh, significantly lower, I would think. But yeah, I'm not trying to stall them out. It's not like the 7, 8, 9 teams are going to be very good either. But
you're right.
Obviously, the Kings are a disaster. Let's stick with your swing for the fences line, and this will lead us into a conversation about Tyreke Halliburton from The Athletic today. Quote, for Simmons, the 76ers have asked the Kings for guard Tyreke Halliburton in multiple first-round picks. They asked for a package around John Collins and multiple first-round picks from the Hawks, along with Atlanta taking on Tobias Harris. The Athletic reported on Wednesday that the Kings do not plan to move De'Aaron Fox or Tyreke Halliburton and want to build around them. I point that out, end quote. That's from The Athletic here today, Shams, and I believe Sam Amick was a part of that as well. I point that out because, one, Daryl Morey he's just obviously desperate in his public negotiations of Ben Simmons through the media. But I think it's interesting too, the note about Tyreke Halliburton in first-round picks, and he also doesn't tie Tobias Harris to the Sacramento Kings in this particular article, because it's pointed out they're trying to move, John Collins, multiple first-round picks, and Atlanta taking Tobias Harris. That's not referenced with Sacramento. So in the latest Ben Simmons nonsense, in which I think we all believe Ben Simmons isn't going to be traded by February 10th, they've now firmly etched Tyreke Halliburton's name as the one that they want to go after.
Yeah, thank you. Next, for once, the Kings can actually be the one to hang up the phone immediately and laugh. Like, there's, to me, this is not saying that Tyreke Halliburton is a better player than De'Aaron Fox, although he may end up becoming that one day. Tyreke Halliburton, in my mind, right now is more valuable to the Sacramento Kings than De'Aaron Fox is, because of his contract, because how young he is, because of what he's already proven to do. D'Lo, you and I had a conversation a little bit on Locked On Kings about if Tyreke is potentially more important already for this Kings team in some capacity than De'Aaron Fox is at this point in time. I know we had a little back and forth about that. I do believe that if the Kings had to choose between Fox or Halliburton, they would pick Halliburton, and the rumors somewhat reflect that. So, I mean, if this is another example, which it is, of Daryl Morey asking for way too high of an asking price, all the power to him. It's not happening. I can't see a scenario where the Kings would be willing to move on from Tyreke Halliburton for Ben Simmons, unless the only thing that makes logical sense in my mind is that McNair is so desperate and his seat is so hot. He's so desperate to save his job that he doesn't care about the future that is Tyreke Halliburton and wants to make that ridiculous swing for the fences move now, which I think would be an awful move for the Kings. So I read that article, rolled my eyes, and basically moved on with my day.
Mm-hmm.
So, Matt, what are we doing now? What are we doing? Because I mentioned before the break, to be honest with you, I have professional obligations to do it. I like basketball, I guess, or whatever, but there's no real reason to watch this team. I mean, this team isn't enjoyable to watch. They're not fun. There's nobody here that we don't know anything about. We know what De'Aaron Fox is, Tyreke Halliburton, so we don't really have to watch them to know what we're getting next year. What is there to watch? I've said numerous times, and I don't know if this exact deal would happen, but I would be going after a James Wiseman. That's why I wanted Cam Reddish, because you bring somebody in here that people maybe haven't seen or they're put into a different role. And I want to see that. I want to see what it looks like. I want to see if there's some hope. There's no hope here right now. What, in your opinion, is there to do to continue to watch this team every night?
Casey, I've been watching Kings basketball for 21 years, 7 years, 8 seasons professionally. I have never loathed watching Kings basketball more than I do this season. If it were not for my professional obligations, if I weren't paid to host Locked On Kings and make appearances like here on D'Lo and Casey, I would not pay an ounce of attention. And I do not blame any Kings fan who says I cannot do it anymore. Now, I do know that this city and this fan base is so passionate that there are many fans who the Kings, quite frankly, do not deserve, who will watch no matter what, even if they hate their lives. They're sitting in front of the TV watching or going to the game still to support. And I admire those people. I love those people. That's what makes Sacramento, Sacramento. But that is the fan base that this team doesn't deserve this season. And quite frankly, they haven't deserved for quite a while. I don't have an answer for you, Casey, about what to watch and what to continue to watch with this Kings team. There's nothing unless they do something at this trade deadline, something with a clear direction in mind. If you do decide that you're only going to make marginal moves, you have to make the correct marginal moves to where you show the fan base you are moving in this future focused direction and give them a reason to watch losing with optimism for the future. Okay, I see what we're doing here. Or you have to do that swing for the fences move, bring in that star that is one way or another going to capture our attention, even if we watch the last bit of Titanic sink below the water. Like that is the only reason. At this point in time, this Sacramento Kings team is way less watchable than the Stockton Kings, than most G League teams. There's no point really in paying attention to this Kings team. And I never, ever, ever thought that I would say that in my life, because I grew up a fan. I grew up a part of this city. I grew up looking forward to going to Arco Arena. I grew up looking forward to Kings games, even when the Kings were winning 17 games and getting their asses kicked by LeBron James-led Cleveland Cavaliers. I looked forward to those games. Now, like it's made me in many ways fall out of love with the game of basketball this season. So what do? I watch the Chicago Bulls to make me feel better.
So here's the funny thing about that. And Matt and I had a similar sort of similar conversation about this on the Locked On Kings podcast. Is, I understand Kenny's frustration right now, and I understand the overall kind of. It's almost the feeling of like tomorrow night we'll get here, or tomorrow, I guess it'll be late afternoon or early evening for us. And it'll be like, there's a Kings game tonight.
Yep.
But the fact is, and I'm not speaking, we're going to watch it. Mm-hmm. Like, and the people in the chat house are going to watch it. And the frustrated Kings fans on Twitter are going to watch it. And the frustrated Kings fans that we don't hear from are going to watch it, because we still have a passion for basketball. It's infuriating that our passion isn't rewarded. But it's still like, even when it feels like there's nothing to watch for, we're all watching and we're all still very invested in this team. And I'll throw something at you to watch, and not to keep plugging the Locked On Kings podcast that you and I did together. Probably your greatest episode ever, if I do say so myself.
Very true.
But we were talking about Tyrese. You asked me a question about Tyrese and De'Aaron and playing together. And it just so happens the next time the Kings play, De'Aaron doesn't play.
Right.
Tyrese, has another one of those big games. And now the sample size of, De'Aaron being out and Tyrese putting up these monster numbers is getting larger and larger. And I don't know what my question is. But there's a question there somewhere, and it's not a De'Aaron or Tyrese question. And it might be more along the lines of what Kenny said a few minutes ago, is why can't Tyrese do this more when De'Aaron's around?
And I think a branch of that question too, maybe two branches of that question is number one, the main question I say will branch off of that is, if you do believe, and I think we all do believe, that Fox and Halliburton can be something together, how long do you give that to figure itself out? Because I don't think 2 seasons, and we haven't gotten to 2 seasons yet, is long enough for two guys to turn into the Steph Clay or Lillard McCollum maybe of a couple of years ago comparison that I was trying to make, and that we were optimistic for when these two were first paired together. Hell, this is just the first season that Tyrese is starting alongside De'Aaron Fox on a night in, night out basis, because that was a spot that was held for way too damn long by Buddy Hield last season, as we all know. I can't explain why that is the case other than the fact that Tyrese knows in those spots that the Kings need that of him. And I think the biggest credit that I can give Tyrese is he recognizes, because he's just that smart, he recognizes what the team needs from him most, even if he passes up a handful of shots too many times when he's playing with De'Aaron, that can be frustrating at times. But he knows when Fox isn't playing, okay, I need to step up offensively if we want any semblance of a chance to win. Just like De'Aaron knows the same thing, and Fox did step up when Tyrese Halliburton was out. The big difference is, though, that Fox is not the facilitator that Tyrese is, and Fox cannot run the half-court offense in the same way that Tyrese Halliburton can. Throughout Fox's entire career, I'm not saying it's his fault, but throughout Fox's entire career, the Kings have been a poor half-court offensive team. And now they have suddenly become better in the half court, especially better in the pick and roll since Tyrese joined. That is the big distinction between the two. That is why I say Tyrese may be more overall important to the Kings today than De'Aaron Fox is, and certainly maybe more important for the team going forward. But importance is up for debate. And I think the best that this Kings team can be still is with Fox and Halliburton working it out together.
And see, that's the frustrating part, because I believe, like you, Matt, in Tyrese's understanding of the game and giving the team whatever they need just because of his basketball IQ out there on the floor. But the team needs him to shoot. You know what I'm saying? And that's the frustrating aspect, because I know he has the IQ to do those things. But when the team is more, or can be more successful with him and De'Aaron being an aggressive 1-2 combination in that backcourt, and he refuses not to shoot as much when De'Aaron is around, it's like, man, like I find myself frustrated by it, because he does things like he does on Saturday where he looks really good. He's aggressive. He's out there putting up a double-double, a 20-point double-double, and things of that nature. So he has the ability to do it, but he just falls back when De'Aaron is there. And ironically, to what you're saying, the team needs him. Like, that's what the team needs, that aggressive Tyrese Halliburton when De'Aaron is there.
And there's a moment that I remember vividly from the beginning of the season, even though it feels like years ago. Tyrese was standing in the corner. I think it was either late in the game or late in the shot clock. And Fox attacked the basket, kicked out to Tyrese, who had an open corner three. And instead of shooting it, he swung the ball to the top of the key. The Kings either ended up getting a shot clock violation or missing the shot. And you saw Fox and Tyrese make eye contact, and Tyrese pats his chest like, that's my bad. I know I should have taken that shot. I think maybe that's the next step in the relationship between the two. Is we know Fox publicly has said he trusts Tyrese to take that shot and wants Tyrese to take that shot more. But the accountability between the two of Fox going, I might be the guy. This might be my team. I'm paid like the star, but you're just as important as me, man. We want you taking that shot. I think that would speak volumes. Now, as far as I know, Fox could be encouraging him, and he's still not doing it. I know that's frustrating. I also don't want Tyrese to become a high volume 3-point shooter, because then I think you lose what makes Tyrese so effective, which is he only really takes quality shots. He doesn't really force bad threes. I want him taking more threes, don't get me wrong, but if he gets up to like Buddy Hield or hell, even Harrison Barnes levels of 3-point shooting, when I say Harrison Barnes levels, which is like what the Kings want Harrison Barnes shooting. He isn't doing it right now, but the Kings want Barnes shooting 9, 10 3-pointers a game. I don't want Tyrese to be at that level, but if you can get Tyrese at 6 or 7, which I actually don't know what his averages are right now, I think that's great. So yes, Tyrese needs to shoot the ball more, but I think his shooting also needs to become because of, in some way, of De'Aaron Fox, not in spite of De'Aaron Fox.
By the way, Harrison Barnes had 29 the other night. Like, there's just been so many wasted big time performances from guys. I was stalling. That was very much a stall tactic to get an answer to your question. Tyrese Halliburton is averaging 4.8 threes per game.
Yeah, that needs to at the absolute most double to me. At the absolute most.
It's actually less than last year. I mean, barely, but it's 5.1 last year, 4.8 this year. I don't know. This team stinks defensively, dude. Like it's one thing for them to be, it's one thing for them to be losing games, but they are embarrassingly bad defensively. And here's it ain't Alvin, it ain't Luke, it ain't Dave Yeager. Like these dudes have just said the hell with defense. And I don't think I have a question out of that. I'm just stunned Alvin Gentry hasn't quit.
Yeah, well, I mean, you want me
I'm a 40-year vet. I don't need this crap. I'm leaving.
You want me to give props to the Sacramento Kings fan base? They have stayed along and stuck around longer than the Kings' effort on defense has this season, which is saying something. I mean, they've given up 133 points in back-to-back games. One was against the Pistons, who averaged 101 points per game. The other one was against the Milwaukee Bucks, defending champions, without Giannis Antetokounmpo. I actually talked about this recently on Locked On Kings. Like, I don't know what the Kings, even if they make a swing for the fences move, even if Ben Simmons does come here, is one or two big name acquisitions enough to save what is this colossal, horrific defense? And
it also has to subtract players. Like
exactly.
I think that's the important
exactly.
part.
And Brendan Nunez said the exact same thing. It's almost an addition by subtraction.
Brilliant.
If you get rid of Buddy Hield and Marvin Bagley at this trade deadline, you probably become a better defensive team, even if you trade them for rocks. Or like target coupons, you probably improve as a defensive team. And I don't mean to be disrespectful, but at the same time kind of do, because those two are two of the worst defenders in the NBA.
Their defense isn't worth target coupons. Come on, man.
Yeah, there's some pretty good target coupons out there.
That's what I'm saying. Ain't nobody ever said, hey, it was a pretty good defensive effort by the Kings. This team, it just dawned on me. They shot 52% in back-to-back games and lost.
Hey, D'Lo, but Buddy Hield is good for one of those random backcourt steals when the Kings are down 20 per game, at least according to the broadcast team. So he's good for one of those a game.
It's nasty, man. Matt, I want to see, I just kind of skated around. Hey, Matt, I want to ask you a hypothetical. Just because, we got a little time left. We got, a couple minutes left. And I just want to ask you. I don't even know if this is on the table. I don't know if it's realistic. Would you trade Rashaan Holmes for James Wiseman?
Or you are going to get somebody to answer that question the way you want.
We still have Matt and Jason. Those are two people I haven't asked.
I think 2 months ago I would have laughed. And at this point, I'd consider it. I don't think I'd say yes, because I like Rashaan Holmes a lot, and I do still believe he can be a good fit for the future as long as there's also a shooter out there with him. But I would consider it at this point. I absolutely would consider it.
I know we're all about trading everybody, but Rashaan is not a problem, is he?
No, but I will say, if Marvin Bagley wasn't here, Rashaan would be getting more heat for missing games than he is. Rashaan has missed a ton of games all 3 seasons. It's not his fault. Health and safety protocols, you can't blame him for it. Getting scratched in the eye twice, I don't blame the guy for it, just like I don't really blame Marvin Bagley for being made out of glass. But Rashaan Holmes has missed a chunk of games every single season. For 2 years, you're paying him nothing, so it did not matter. Now you're paying the guy, and you need him. The Kings desperately need Rashaan, so how much can you rely upon him? I'm not ready to start the Rashaan Holmes isn't reliable conversation at all, because there are easier guys to pick on, and Rashaan is not to blame for where this Kings team is at. But, man, I
got you. You're right.
Start paying attention to that a little bit more, I think.
Yeah, my whole thing with Rashaan, once again, is how are you going to get something back of consequence in any trade outside of Rashaan Holmes, Tyreke Halliburton, or Fox?
Or Harrison Barnes. I think you could get something of consequence for Harrison Barnes. But what is consequence? Is consequence that's my thing is.
But Wiseman's a gamble, though. I know you're talking about something in return. That's a major roll of the dice.
Wiseman has an opportunity to be a top 2 player on your team. It's a gamble, but he has an opportunity to.
But also, if Wiseman is a top 2 player on your team, how good are you?
I think really good. I think when he can stay healthy, I think he's a good ball player.
But the point that you're bringing up, Casey, is the point you're bringing up, Casey, is you're making a trade. You're trading a asset that you have now for a young player that could turn into something and fit with this group going forward, which is where, going back to the start of our conversation, if the Kings pivot to that kind of mindset, then I'm open to them trading Harrison. I'm open to them trading Rashaan. If the Kings are still in this, we're trying to make the playoffs, but you trade guys like that, you're not going to get anything of substance really that is going to improve you. The only way that you're improving yourself drastically enough to make the playoffs this year is to trade one of Fox or Halliburton, and even that might not do enough. That's why I think the Kings really need to strongly consider a pivot towards focusing on the future and focusing on this year's draft, and really going from there and trying to surround Fox and Halliburton like Shams reported you want to do, rather than stick on this pipe dream. But we also don't know if Monte McNair would survive that pivot.
Matt George, Locked On Kings podcast.